Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Duke Football Coverage Podcast, brought to you as always by Bull City Coordinators. You can find us on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. You can find us on all the social medias. I think all of them now. There's some that I may have accounts for that I don't remember or deleted, but all the main ones at least. And you can find us anywhere you get anywhere that you get your podcasts. Now, our next guest, and this is part of a concerted effort to go away from, to get a little bit more people who cover sports for a living, a little bit more of the insiders to come on and talk about football. We're still going to do interviews with players and former players, but I want to steer the podcast more towards the kind of guests that we're going to have next. And speaking of our next guest, he comprised half of the ACC Panic Room, half of the OG on the radio, and now half of the Ovies and Giglio podcast, which I believe the podcast company name is the OG Live Podcasting Company. You can listen to that anywhere you get your podcasts, or will be able to soon. I don't know if you guys have dropped on Google yet, but we'll figure that out soon. I'm getting a nod that we have. The studio is telling me yes. So, Joe Ovies, how are you, sir?
Good. Just, navigating this whole independent media thing for the first time ever.
Well, you know what? Take a drink. You've got one. I've got one.
Yeah.
It's a success.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's been an interesting last 3 weeks, actually. Originally when the radio show ended, like I said, I'm not kidding. I mean, when I was a senior at NC State, starting in the fall of 2000 and graduating in 2001, when I started working at 850 The Buzz, the original sports talk station in the market, as a part-timer. And then that eventually grew into a full-time role in 2002 when I came on to be Adam Gold's producer. Basically, at that time, it was a glorified call screener. I would just take phone calls. What do you want to say? Yada, yada, yada. And then occasionally do some stringer work, which ironically enough was how I was introduced to Joe Giglio way back in the day, because he was annoyed at me that I'd be up in the old double wide in the sky at Carter Finley Stadium, the original press box. That was open air and whatnot. And they had hardwired phone lines that I could call to ESPN and Fox Sports Radio, Sporting News Radio. A lot of these networks don't exist anymore. But I can make some good beer money calling in, doing 30-second updates. Phillip Rivers, just such and such, throwing it to Roxy Bernstein. And Joe would get mad because he's trying to make notes and I'm in the background, projecting in radio mode. But yeah, a lot's evolved from that time. Like I mentioned, those sports radio networks don't exist anymore. And we were trying to move our radio show in the direction that kind of made it as platform agnostic as possible. And now, honestly, the only thing that's different is that we're just not on the radio. Everything we're doing is pretty much what we were doing on the radio show, now just kind of condensed into an hour. Because dirty little secret about sports talk radio, if you're doing a 3-hour show, you're actually doing 3 1-hour shows, because people are coming in and out of the audience all the time. They're in their car, they're out of their car, et cetera, et cetera. So now we can just give you a good solid hour and you can consume it what you want. And so far the response has been, it's been great. It's been really, really cool to see people go and it's like, all right, where you at? What do I need to do, et cetera. And we're going to keep it going this summer and hopefully have things in order by the time football season rolls around.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm not a hockey guy at all, growing up in South Carolina, and you've had a lot of hockey, but I've listened to every episode. I've enjoyed it. That. It's been
have we at least made the hockey somewhat entertaining for you?
You're talking about it has made it entertaining.
Okay, good.
But I'm not going to devote time to hockey. I'm sorry. It's just not in my.
No, that's fine. But it's funny that's the thing about what we do, right? There are outlets like yours that can really focus on Duke, right? I totally get that.
The dozens of us that listen to Duke football.
Dude, you put me onto this, but there are several Duke football podcasts that I was like, oh, you know what? Good. I mean, Duke football, and I always make the argument, Duke football fans do exist. Okay. I've met them. All right. We're talking right now. But no, whether it's Duke or State or Carolina, or specifically the Carolina Hurricanes, sometimes we forget that sports is supposed to be something that everybody can kind of enjoy. It's a community thing. and you have to be able to present it in a way that makes it inclusive. And, one of the highest compliments I could get when I was doing the radio show was from people who were like you, that, hockey ain't my thing, but I kind of get why, or you're presenting in a way, and I get why it's a big deal. And I'll kind of put up with it. I'm not going to get a super fan. I mean, you're not going to be breaking down lines with me in defensive pairings, but at least you have an appreciation for what the Carolina Hurricanes are doing.
Exactly. Now, one thing though, I was curious, when you went with your name, did you ever consider Two Joes, One Podcast?
Oh, that's a deep cut. No. Unfortunately, it's funny, when we started the show, I originally wanted to just call it two guys named Joe. Just that's it. However, there is a radio show, a long-standing radio show out in the Triad that had completely just slipped my mind. It's two guys named Chris. So it was like, that's a little too close to that.
Cyber squatting, yeah.
Yeah, that was a little too close. And Giglio, when you have distinctive names like we do, that's the way that the SEO works. And so the Ovies and Giglio is by design. People want to know what happened to us. Well, you're looking us up on Google. There it is. It's popping up. We're there. So
Exactly. And you were very easy to find. You're putting out a lot of content. You're on Reddit. I saw, started following you guys there. You're on YouTube. Lots of content coming up on YouTube. Obviously, the podcast is great. Now, you've done podcasting in the past.
Yeah.
All right. Before this. So people who follow me on Twitter or generally are around me know I can be a little grumpy. And one of the things that I don't like, that's who I am. I'm comfortable. Okay. I'm a 70s dad in the 2020s. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right. I'm a 70s dad. I don't really care for uniform reveals.
Mm-hmm.
And the Duke Football Talk guys, all those guys I think very highly of. They do a great job catering to people who like the uniform reveals. I just don't get into it. But
okay.
But for you, Joe, I'm going to do a uniform reveal.
Ooh.
On the show. You can see
right.
This would work better if I posted the video, but I'm not doing that.
That's fine.
All right. But you can see I've got my fleece on. I got a gray fleece, and you can tell I got a red shirt. So I'm going to give you one guess for the uniform reveal. What is the shirt that I have on under the fleece?
I have two. Well, you mentioned podcasts, so I'm going to go with a Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks red Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks shirt. There it is. I love it.
Boom! You got it. I
love it.
I bought this because I listened to that. I listened to that season, and it was fantastic. I'd interviewed Clarkston Hines before, and he had mentioned that team.
Yeah.
Okay. He had a fun time doing it. Realized it wasn't going to work, and so he left. And of course, the team left too, which made it a little bit easier. But that was a great series exploring the attempt to get real football. Well, not real football, but pro football there.
Yeah.
Professional football.
Yeah.
It was great. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, so I got to go back to, whether it's us or the way the company, what Capital Broadcasting was when I was there, is look, we were given opportunities to explore things if we wanted to. And obviously there's always an eye towards making money off it. I mean, it's radio, you got to sell ads. But with podcasts, there's always this push and pull as to what do you want podcasts to be. They could be best ofs, which I've always viewed as kind of customer service. We want you to listen to the radio show in real time. That's ultimately what pays the bills. But the podcast is there if you missed an interview, if you really wanted to check something out, right? And social media is there to complement to it. Everything was there to funnel you towards radio. But sometimes you don't want to just keep talking about the same thing. So the format allowed you to explore a topic a little bit more in depth, or do a more in-depth interview that you can never do on the radio. So Giglio had this, it's something he couldn't do at the newspaper because they just don't have the audio archives that we do. Wanted to do like the definitive story on Russell Wilson and why he left NC State and how it gets told incorrectly all the time. And between him being there in the building and his connections with guys who had been on that team and talking to Tom O'Brien and whatnot, And then our audio archives, where Adam and I, when we were doing the show, had several instances where we had talked to Russell Wilson, including the day that he announced he was going to Wisconsin. The 99.9 The Fan Studios share space with another company that Capital Broadcasting owns called Microspace. And oftentimes you'll see people coming through to do satellite link interviews with whoever, news outlets, ESPN. So Russell happened to be in the building that day. And Russell kind of knew who we were from previous interviews. And we asked him, hey, man, you want to come into the studio real quick before you get out of here to record something? So we got him that day. And, the problem with radio is you air it, it goes out there and it's forgotten, but we kept the file. So this presented two opportunities, one for Joe to tell this story completely, and one for me to kind of be like, hey, wait a minute, we did some really good interviews. And people they don't know because it just happened on the radio and you forget about it. So let's put it somewhere where it can live, all right, here is this story. So we did that, and digging around working with Jason Jennings over at WREL, who was an incredible help for that podcast, I poking around, I'm like, so, what kind of other audio do we have? He's like, we have all sorts of stuff. So this kind of rekindled my interest in what was an original project with the late Carlton Tudor. And Carlton Tudor, I had this, it's kind of morbid if you think about it, but here I am looking at this guy who has all this institutional knowledge and he's getting old and eventually he's going to pass away, and what happens when he passes away. So I wanted him to originally do a podcast with me to kind of like help explain why things are the way that they are in the Triangle. You were there. Tell us the stories. Take us behind the scenes. And it actually ended up being featured in one of the early episodes of A Brief History of Triangle Sports, where he explains the dynamics of Duke and Carolina and recruiting and how football was super hardcore. And there's a Duke Wake Forest. What is it? I forgot who the player was, but like off the top of my head, I can't remember who it was, but like Wake Forest duped this recruit into thinking that Duke's campus was their campus. And he was like really awed by the cathedral architecture and everything else. And, Wallace Wade was a gem of a stadium at that time. And he's like, yeah, I'm coming. And he gets to Wake Forest, like the original Wake Forest, and it's just not anything close to that. So Tudor knew all these things, right? So that kind of snowballed into doing these one-offs for various other, moments in Triangle history, like the Global Basketball Association and the fact that the Raleigh Bullfrogs were a professional basketball team that played one season at Dorton Arena, or the Ice Caps.
And Chris Corciani knew the back cuts to get to the bank before they ran out of money or the checks would bounce.
And nobody knows any of this stuff. They forgot, or people who were around like have a vague recollection of it, and it's fun to revisit that stuff. So as I was poking around, there's the Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks, which I've heard about because of the World League of American Football and all the kind of weird little ties to the ACC in the area. And I did an interview with Tony Haynes, the analyst for the Wolfpack Radio Network. And as I'm talking to Tony, it was supposed to be a one-off. The way he's talking to me, I'm like, I can't fit this into one episode. There's too much here. There's way too much here. And as I was, then I found out Capital Broadcasting's own connection to trying to get the Panthers. And at that point, I realized, like, you know what? I got to do a full series on this. And the trick here is, and this was my argument with management, is like, well, who cares about the Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks? And my point was, it's not really about the Skyhawks. It's about this place. It's about how things kind of developed into how they are now, with a tie to the NFL as well. And the response to that, and again, I appreciate it, the response to that one has been really, really good. And I had some more ideas in the works for another season of Brief History of Triangle Sports. I don't know what's going to become of that, but if that's the last podcast project I worked on, then I'll walk away really happy with the results, because I really enjoyed that.
No, I thought it was great. And it was interesting to learn too, not with the Skyhawks, but that Corciani was like 3 days short of getting his NBA pension.
Yes. Yeah.
That was crazy.
There's another story there with, a guy that I know who became friends with Chris Corciani. He tried really, really hard to get him on some rosters to get those 3 days, but it never panned out. It's tough business, man. It's a tough business.
Well, yeah. Well, you're in a tough business too. I mean, I remember I was friends with a lot of guys who did journalism at College of Charleston, and
Mhm.
going through that, watching them evolve and change their careers. It's not pleasant. It's not personal either, but
No, it's
it's a
not.
tough business. Talk to us a little bit. You mentioned a little bit what you have coming up for basketball and football season. Talk to us a little bit more, if you can, about what we should be looking for and what we should be ready for.
On the podcast, on the show.
Yeah, on the OG.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I have to I have to remind myself that we're only 3 weeks at this, and while it might not be the most polished product out there, at the end of the day, if the audio sounds okay, then most people will consume it. But coming on down the line, we got eyes on a studio space, so it's not just me and Joe talking in two boxes. Although I think the way that if it's going to be a two-person setup, like it's just us. I don't have a producer. We don't have an engineer. I'm the more technical one. So this kind of kicked me in the pants to get a new computer and some new equipment, everything else. So I'll probably try to find a way to work in an actual studio space so that we're in the room together, but with like two cameras so that, you can see us in the boxes at the same time. We're going to go to ACC kickoff. The one thing about the ACC and longtime members of the ACC or longtime members of the local schools, you do this long enough and they're around there too. They understand you're not goofing around. Like they know we're not, I'm not trying to say this in a demeaning way, but it's not like just some startup podcast or some guy with a newsletter who has not done much of anything that has to eventually earn that. I think most of everybody has been understanding of, hey, yeah, look, it's unfortunate what happened, and you guys are still trying to keep this thing going, and we want your voices represented here. So they'll work with us to get us to ACC kickoff and everything else. So eventually, look, it's really easy to get lost in the 10,000 foot view. Right now, my focus is on getting the base product right, and that's kind of getting the reps of doing this podcast. And then eventually, hopefully towards football season, we can kind of grow that out, maybe introduce a newsletter, maybe introduce other podcasts. We'll see. But right now it's just trying to get this thing going.
Well, I'm glad you guys are still doing it, because one of the things that I enjoyed about you not being in the triangle, right? I'm in Virginia.
Yeah.
And I would watch and listen to your YouTube clips that you put up. And one of the things I always liked about it was you two always had very intelligent, thoughtful conversations, unlike a lot of the sports radio and the sports commentary that I just tune out, which is just two people yelling at each other.
Right.
So, I mean, I felt like you guys elevated the quality of the conversation, right? And you walked away feeling smarter for having listened to it and not just engaging because whoever was on, the commentators, were able to get you angry about something.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have strong opinions about stuff, and I will, I'm not, I guess the thing is, I'm not just saying things to say things, I genuinely believe them, and they still upset people. You're going to upset people when you work in a market like this where you got.
Well, that's because you're obsessed with teams that are in the area that you just keep talking about, and you're just obsessed with them. Right.
Exactly. It's that's the funny thing about the platform agnostic nature of places like YouTube is that people didn't realize we were an actual radio show in the triangle. And I guess they kept getting fed like NC State takes. So like the one time we talked about UNC, they're like, why are these state guys talking about UNC? I'm like, buddy, we're in the triangle. We're talking about all the schools. So that leads to a dynamic. But I think it speaks to a larger issue. The people get upset because technology has made it really easy to find your people. In a lot of ways, that's great that you find your people, like-minded people. But there is another side to it where you're only going to get fed sunshine all the time, or any sort of negativity gets perceived as some sort of like, well, you're just out to get my squad. Well, no, I'm just simply pointing out that your team has some defensive holes, and these catastrophic plays are the reason why I don't believe they're going to be able to get to a bowl game. It's not because I don't like your team. It's just that this is what I see. I mean, this was evident in Sam Howell's final season at North Carolina, where I was just like, are you telling me that the defense is suddenly going to stop people? How'd that play out? Or what I've seen with NC State where people got mad at me because I would just kept screaming, this offense is what it is. Stop getting on, XYZ. And like, oh, it's whatever. It's again, I'm just telling you what I see in the grand scheme of things. But when you're so used to getting fed, everything will work out, everything is okay, I believe in the boys, that kind of stuff, then it becomes really difficult to hear valid criticism. I think most people get it. I think most people get it. You're only really hearing from the negative people on social media, which is interesting because when all this has gone down, I haven't really been hearing from the negative people. I tweeted this out the other day. I kind of miss my haters. Not gonna lie. I kind of miss the haters. It's weird. It's like, I want to argue with somebody. Let's go.
Yeah, but when you do it, like when you make your points about people, you don't do it in a way that denigrates the people that you're talking to. Okay. Right. You're not shouting at them like today. Well, you almost shouted today when I was listening to you talk about FSU. All right.
Right. But I did say that the AD at Florida State needs to be called out on the BS.
Right. But you and Joe aren't yelling and screaming at each other. Right. It's not like the old crossfire from CNN for us old guys. Right. Sure. So the point that I'm making is the way that you guys talk about it, I think, informs and educates people.
Gotcha.
And I always feel like your criticisms and your takes are fair, even if they're like, if for example, you were to say, we don't know how good Duke football is going to be this year because they had a pretty weak schedule last year. I've said that repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fair take, and it's not being critical of anybody. It's just, we don't know.
It's not. Also, that easy schedule is vastly different now without divisions. So these are all things. And by the way, this is going to be tricky for everybody in ACC football now. We don't know how this is going to play out without divisions when the schedules get real. So I'm looking forward to it. I like the better matchups, honestly. I like that State and Duke are going to start playing again more consistently because that's good for us. I think that's what people ultimately want to see. But yeah, I think that's a fair. Also, to Duke's point, it's easy to do when you surprise people. All right, do it again, right? Back it up when nobody's taking you for granted anymore. There's respect on Mike Elko, those types of things. So all those things are valid.
Right. Now, and let's stay on ACC football and the 4 teams. Well, we still have a conference, which we may wake up tomorrow and there's no conference.
No,
but as long as the
2030.
Yeah, as long as the grant of rights is there, I think the schools are staying.
Yes.
Although I did see the Sports Channel 8 tweet about the ACC being open to non-equal revenue sharing, and then Miami realizes it's based on performance, which if you have not seen yet, go find that tweet. You will laugh. I want to ask you a little bit kind of about the teams as a whole, and then go through them maybe one by one. And kind of where I am with them is, and you're an NC State alum, so this may speak to you. You may feel this one a little too close to home, but it seems like the teams are really good at getting close to breaking through and then finding a way to break your heart painfully.
And I would make the argument that that's about 98% of college football. There is such a stratification in college football that I think, and Bomani Jones and I and Giulio have had this conversation a lot on the air, that I think people forgot how to appreciate 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins. Okay. And each one of those, by the way, each one of those markers has a different level of context. Okay. But I think we truly forgot to enjoy 8, 9 wins in a bowl game, because the college football playoff has created an environment where if you don't make it, what's the point? Right. We kind of see this in college basketball with the amount of teams that make the NCAA tournament. We've seen it devalue the ACC tournament. Oh, okay. You got knocked out after a game in the ACC tournament. No big deal. We'll just get them in the NCAA tournament. So I'm okay with NC State and Carolina and Duke kind of being where they're at, as long as they give us entertaining matchups when they play each other. And certainly NC State and North Carolina have given each other entertaining matchups. Wake Forest has been in that mix too, and they've ripped NC State's heart out and showed it to them on several occasions. And that's fascinating to us, not on a national level, but that's ultimately what should matter. I mean, look, I can tune into ESPN or SiriusXM and get any number of opinions on Georgia football or Alabama football.
Wait, are you saying there's a big industry backing the SEC?
It's not so much.
Hold on, let me write this down.
Right. It's breaking news here. Breaking news here. I mean, my point is, if you're talking, because it's not just the SEC, you're going to hear about Ohio State, right?
Oh, and hey, the Big Ten is great until they play anybody.
Right. All those things are your typical conversations. But at the end of the day, locally, I think people want to know, why something happened, why it played out that way. For our purposes, I think there's way more interest locally in MJ Morris or Brennan Armstrong for NC State at quarterback, right? There's much more curiosity with what's happening at North Carolina with Drake May and whether or not the additions through the transfer portal will make a difference, right? Because they need playmakers. They got to get better on defense, and they've made some changes, the exit of Dre Bly and everything else. So all those things don't get discussed enough. I mean, where are you going to find that stuff? And that's the thing that I guess some people might not know. I know some people in this industry that only do their on-air stuff and that's it. They don't consume other media. They don't feel like it's a way to properly prep for a show. I don't view it that way. For me, I've always come at it from the approach of, all right, well, what's everybody else talking about? Cool. What am I really going to add to that conversation that hasn't already been said, right? Unless I scream. Okay. So let's kind of, it's the old TLC song, right? Stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. Well, there's plenty of stuff to talk about when it comes to local football squads. So let's just kind of dive into that. And that's where I think we've probably seen most of our success. I mean, the ratings reflected that. We spent most of the time talking about local matters, and you weren't going to get that anywhere else on the dial. So I think it worked, and I think it'll continue to work, just in a different format now.
I want to ask you about the team specifically and put it in this way. I've got 4 questions at least specific to the team. Okay. As a lawyer, hey, I'm a lawyer. I know never to limit myself to a specific set of questions. So at least 4. There may be others. Okay. Which of the 4 Carolina teams, including Chapel Hill College, do you think will have the best record this season?
I don't have the schedules in front of me. And I will be completely upfront with you in that I haven't spent that much time thinking about football right now, mainly because of the Carolina Hurricanes and obviously with the expansion stuff. It is what it is. But off the top of my head,
it's summer, man. That's the hot takes. It's all it's about. I
agree. You got to go on vibes now. It's all based on vibes.
Oh, no. I agree with you 100%. I don't like to do predictions this early because you've still got people getting offers through the portal. I mean, you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you the 2 schools that are going to have a hard time adjusting to life. And that's going to be Wake Forest without Sam Hartman. And that's going to be NC State. I think Brennan Armstrong, because of the relationship he's got with, coming from Virginia, with Anai, the offensive coordinator, who he's had experience with too. MJ Morris doesn't have that COVID year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle him. Because he has a lot of upside, but you know what Brennan Armstrong is, and Armstrong is going to be put on a team that is depleted, not depleted, but they're breaking in a lot of new guys. I mean, that was the feature of NC State last year. The reason why NC State got the hype that it did last year, they literally brought everybody back. They had a good defense. Devin Leary was, statistically really, really good. The one mistake that everybody made was the assumption that the skill positions, the wide receiver group, would step up. That obviously did not happen. And they also got super, super conservative, and that's why they made those changes. So I feel like they're going to go with Brennan Armstrong because they're just going to have to let it rip. But I think they're going to have a struggle with that. I think it's going to be a lean year for NC State. So that leaves us with Duke and North Carolina. I want to say Duke, not just because I'm on this podcast. What's that?
Let me read you their schedule first.
Okay, read the schedule, please.
Okay, all right.
Because I don't have the schedule in front of me.
Clemson, week 1.
Yeah.
Lafayette.
Yeah.
Northwestern.
Okay.
Which has gotten like every person in the portal of late. It's crazy.
Yeah.
UConn, who also plays state this year.
Yeah, but they're terrible. But anyway.
Notre Dame. Bye week. NC State. Florida State, Louisville. Don't sleep on them this year.
No, I'm not gonna sleep with Louisville.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know what? Now that you're telling me the schedule, forget
Well,
it.
I'm not. Okay, I'm not done. Wake,
Yeah.
Carolina,
Yeah.
Virginia, and then the team that the football gods will never let us beat, Pitt.
Oh no. Yeah. Now forget it. Now give me Carolina. I don't even have to look at Carolina. I don't even have to look at Carolina's schedule. Give me Carolina now.
All right, I'll give you their schedule. South Carolina, App State, Minnesota, Pitt, bye week, Syracuse, Miami. Oh, you got to be kidding me. Miami, Virginia, Georgia Tech, Campbell, Duke, Clemson, and NC State.
Yeah, I know Mac. It's funny you mentioned that. The only thing I know about the schedule off the top of my head is that Mac Brown doesn't like the way things end, right? With that trio of Clemson, Duke, and State, right? But I remember saying this when he was complaining about the schedules coming out earlier this year. It's like, you can't talk about being about that life, stepping things up. I mean, for heaven's sake, you coached at Texas and then complain when really only one of those three is one you should be concerned with. I mean, I get that they're rivalry games and all that stuff.
Yeah, Duke and Carolina can go either way.
It really can. It really can. That's the thing that I think people outside the area don't quite understand. Duke, Carolina does not have sizzle. That's just a game you don't want to lose, right? State Carolina is the one with sizzle. Duke, Carolina in football is just kind of like look, man, I went to a game at Wallace Wade Stadium.
And it was great, and it was fantastic, great experience.
I love Wallace Wade. Wallace Wade is actually one of my favorite places to go watch a football game. It's easy to get in, out, all that kind of stuff. But I remember buying like general admission tickets for like $5 to a Duke Carolina game in the last 5 years, because it was towards the end of the David Cutcliffe time and it just wasn't all that good. And it was a low stakes affair. And it was a game where they scored, I think it was like 28-28 by the end of the first quarter or by half. It was a barn burner that day at Wallace Wade. I can't remember the year off the top of my head, but it was pretty recent. And then things cooled off in the second half. So yeah, based on schedule, give me Carolina. Drake May is the real deal. He really is the real deal. The worry is just simply on the defensive side. Can they keep other teams from making it interesting? Are they going to allow other teams to hang around? That's what bit him in the ass all last year. So
I think the game that you were talking about might have been 2018 Duke Carolina. It was finished 42-35. Daniel Jones last year. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
that was a great game. We were there.
It was an amazing game. I was not expecting anything, and they were fireworks early on. There was no defense in that game. It was great.
That's the year. If you go back and look at that, and I did a deep dive on it, had it not been for all the injuries that Duke suffered, they could have made it back to the ACC championship game that year. I mean, it is, if you go back and look at all the players who got hurt, it's just unreal. I mean, just unreal. But you raised a point, and I think you may agree with what I was going to ask you about as to whether Wake has plateaued and kind of hit a point under Clawson where they've hit their highest point that they're going to get to. But I'm just curious.
That's a pretty good high, by the way.
I'm not arguing. I agree. I'm not arguing about that. I'm not arguing about that.
I mean, they won the dang division, for heaven's sake. But anyway,
I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I agree with you. Okay, I think Clawson's a lifer, and I think he's done a great job. Okay, and I don't think anybody should have any other thoughts about that. But I'm just curious. You said Duke and Carolina doesn't have sizzle. Shouldn't the Duke Wake football rivalry be a thing? I mean, shouldn't the conference invest in that, in making that a big thing?
It won't. But what you bring up between Wake and Duke is interesting, because Wake and Duke are essentially tied at the hip in terms of, if one is successful, the other is wondering, well, why can't we do that? Right. I mean, let's not forget the reason why David Cutcliffe ended up being brought to Duke in the first place. It was after the Jim Grobe run at Wake Forest, and they had updated their facilities at Wake. I mean, Wake's got a lot of damn money, man. And I remember there was again, you do this long enough, things start to run together. But I remember there was like a meeting of Duke football greats, right? And they all got together and were like, we can't let this happen. The lowest point of Duke football being when Louisville was a non-conference
I
game.
remember
When the Louisville lawyer, no, I'm sorry, the Duke lawyer, to get out of the bye game, said that Duke is so bad that any team would be a replacement level for them. So go get whoever you want because they're that bad. And they won.
That was right. And that was not incorrect then.
No, it wasn't incorrect. And the judge agreed. And they got out of the bye game. So, but part of the drive was, well, wait a minute. If Wake can do this, why can't we do this? And you saw the investment. Pretty sure that's when they broke ground on the Yo Center for the indoor practice facility. And then you saw the success with David Cutcliffe. Wake sees the tail end of the Grove era. And then now it's history repeating, right? Cutcliffe ran out of steam, unfortunately, which is its own conversation entirely. They see what, they don't, you could easily say he's a Dave Clawson guy in Mike Elko, but clearly Elko wants to be his own guy, and I respect that. His time in the SEC as a defensive coordinator, his time at Notre Dame has certainly helped him. And you're seeing a little more life. And of course, look at what they've done to Wallace Wade as well, right? I mean, Wallace Wade and the luxury suites and everything else. I mean, it's top of the line stuff for a small private school that's trying to play football. So that's where the Duke Wake rivalry is. It's the other one can't be better than the other without sparking some type of change. And maybe that's where it ends up being. That's where the scoreboard is. It's not necessarily on the football field. It's on how they go about their business.
Well, I think the conference could try to make that a recurring rivalry and make it a bigger deal because it makes sense. They're not too far away from each other.
But is that TV?
Size.
Is that going to drive TV?
It will. Okay. Here is how I think it will.
Okay.
All right. Wake has been doing really well, right?
Yeah.
We'd agree. If Duke can get to a point where they're averaging 8 wins a year for the foreseeable future, and they're kind of knocking on the door, it's going to take time. It could draw a TV. Now, the ACC also needs somebody to talk about it a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
So we don't end up with what we saw in the NCAA tournament for basketball, where at the end of the season, I sit down to watch Northwestern, who finished second in the Big Ten, play. I can't remember who it was, but it was the team that was going to finish ninth. And I'm like, this is your second best team. And we're saying the ACC has a down year.
Right.
I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The Big Ten's going to get run out of the building. Right. It did.
And it did. Yeah, it did.
It absolutely did. So I think it could drive TV, certainly locally, but it's going to take some investment into it. And if you want to keep the ACC alive, you've got to make games like that matter instead of, hey, let's bring Pitt down at the end of the season, or let's have Syracuse and Florida State play.
Yeah, there's a push and a pull. I mean, we saw North Carolina do this with a non-conference conference game when they knocked out their home and home with Wake Forest, right?
I wish Spurrier was in the league then.
And I know there was a push by fans to be like, okay, well, if Carolina did this with Wake, well, why can't State do this with Duke? Now, there was no interest from State to do that. So, because those State Duke games have historically been pretty tough. I mean, I'll never forget Phillip Rivers needing to scramble. And when Phillip Rivers scrambles, it's like he's got diving flippers on, but he ended up having that last minute, goal line dive. I want to say that was at Carter Finley Stadium. Regardless, I see what you're saying. And from a regional perspective, those are the games that can get locals going. It's why I say that State should play App. Carolina should play App.
Duke should bring ECU back.
Yes. Those games matter on a regional level. Unfortunately, the reality is that those games don't necessarily move the needle. And they also, in the case of App State, end up, this is why Jim Phillips reportedly told ACC schools stop scheduling these home and homes with these group of 5 teams because it makes us look bad when you go to their place. I think there's something commendable for that. I mean, I wouldn't do back-to-back group of 5 games like Carolina did this past season, where they went to App and then they went to Georgia State and almost lost both those games. But still, It's just the whole reason why they got rid of divisions is they could do better for made for TV matchups. It's more about Clemson and Virginia Tech playing more often. It's more about, I'm trying to think who was it that like Miami never saw, but they should have. But there's all sorts of things that play into that.
Just another team for Miami to lose to inexplicably, despite all the talent.
Fair. Unfortunately, Duke Wake is more of a sickos committee type game for people to enjoy, just not a national thing, unfortunately.
No, I think that's fair. But I do think to get buzz going about the conference, it helps to have rivalries that matter, right?
To get buzz going honestly, to get buzz going for the conference, it's not about Duke Wake. It's about Virginia Tech getting their head out of their ass, like not having the lost Fuente years. It's about because again, I'm old enough to remember when Florida State was unstoppable and there was a buzz when Florida State came to your building and you had a chance to beat them. And it was a big deal. So that's what the ACC is ultimately lacking. There's no monster. Giglio likes to call them the monster, right? Who's the monster? And for a couple of years there, Clemson was the monster. And
for a good while.
And nobody was saying that the ACC was necessarily bad. And that's what ended up driving interest in the league. Before that, with Jimbo Fisher and Jameis Winston, they were the monster. But unfortunately, the ACC over the last couple of years, it's just been kind of shoulder shruggy. I think there's some folks are tired of Dabo. I get that. But that doesn't mean Florida State should be in the mess that they've been in. They showed potential last year, but with 10 wins. I'll be curious to see if they can back that up. But really, the two biggest culprits for why the ACC is in the position they're in right now are Miami and Virginia Tech. It's as simple as that. Those were made for TV matchups. Virginia Tech used to dominate Thursday nights. That was their night back in the day. But they've been terrible. They've made terrible hires. And that's on the administrations. That's not on the ACC. That's why I get mad at Mike Alford at Florida State and why I kind of raise my voice because it's like, yeah, guys, the reason why you're in the position you're in is because you're broke. And the reason why you're broke is because you hired the wrong guy and you're paying him $18 million to go away. You had, initiatives that you didn't really have money for in terms of upgrades and things like that. So that's the issue with the ACC. And sometimes I think we overcomplicate it and we try to find these other like diamonds in the rough matchups, which I think are good for you and me. I mean, it helps me, but from the league perspective, you need your big dogs to be good. And unfortunately, they just haven't. And that's the heart of the problem.
No, I think you're right about that, but I think it helps if you have a deep conference, right? So I think the problem with the ACC of late has been it's just been Clemson, right? And there's nobody else below Clemson, right? So everybody looks at it as, yeah, well, Clemson's the only team in that conference. Now, if Florida State was what, you graduated, you said what, 01?
01, yeah.
I graduated 03. We're about the same age.
Yeah.
I remember those Florida State teams.
Yeah.
I remember when Virginia Tech came into the ACC and almost killed the Blue Devils repeatedly, like almost indicted for, manslaughter or something.
No, that was the Alabama game.
Right. Well, let's not. I don't have enough liquor to deal with that right now. But no, in the roof years when Virginia Tech would play them, I mean, it was bad, right?
Yeah.
But you had those dominant teams. And for a while, Miami looked like it could have been, and you had teams that could compete with each other. It was a deep conference. You just don't have that now. And so I think, you're making a really good point. I think you've got to have the team at the top dog or a collection of top dogs that are really good, but you also have to have not a lot of crap down at the bottom.
What if I told you that the ACC is sneaky deep?
I don't dispute that.
Okay. It's that I'm trying to find a right way to put this, because I'm not trying to absolve, because to your point, I'll put it like this. I got it. So the problem with the league is that when you have Wake win a division, or when Duke wins the Coastal or something like that,
as God intended,
of course, but unfortunately that is viewed as the league being down. We just saw this in basketball because you didn't have your usual suspects at the top. and you had a really, really bad, or two really, really bad programs, Louisville being the biggest culprit, you overlooked the fact that actually the league was pretty strong in the middle. It had a pretty good meaty middle, but we don't appreciate that. So I feel like the ACC has had that with teams like NC State over the last couple of years. North Carolina would fit that bill. North Carolina shouldn't be in a position where they're supposed to be, repping the league. They should be a good part of the depth, a nice, strong middle. It's Wake Forest, and it gets back to how we started this conversation, where about 98% of college football programs would be happy with 8 wins, okay? And they should be happy with 8 wins because that's how the real world lives. And there's only a really, really small percentage of teams in that stratosphere that can operate at that level. We're talking about Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and the like. So without the teams that are supposed to be top dogs showing you they're top dogs, we don't appreciate the rest of the league, unfortunately. We just look at it as a knock. I think you talk about lazy. You and I were talking about laziness. That's laziness. I mean, I was kind of screaming this from an ACC basketball perspective this past season. Let's get away from how bad Louisville is. Let's focus on how Duke, not a traditional Duke squad in John Shire's first year. That was a good freaking team that knew their roles. And I thought they had a sneaky opportunity in the NCAA tournament. And of course, they just kind of got bullied in their loss to Tennessee, but it is what it is.
Which happens to Duke throughout the one and done.
It
did not surprise me at all. Not surprise me at all.
Yeah. So, but my point is that I think we didn't have an appreciation for Duke this year because they didn't have the shiny objects. That's laziness. But when you're trying to keep up with 128 football programs in the Power Five or whatever it is, that it's easy to just look past that stuff because you got to drive the conversation on talk shows about who belongs in the college football playoff. And the Carolina Clemson championship game this past season was a compelling matchup from the fact that Carolina was trying to win an ACC championship for the first time since 1980. Okay. And Clemson was trying to kind of take back their corners, but there was no buzz. There was zero buzz at that championship game because there were no college football playoff implications. Who's that on? Is that on the league or is that on us? And it's really on us and how we talk about this stuff.
Joe Ovies, college football playoff ruined college football. We're just going to put that.
It did. I was a proponent for college. I was a proponent for the college football playoff because it made sense. But now that we have the data, I think it's kind of like replay. I wanted replay. Now I don't want replay because replays ruined the experience.
Breach.
College football playoff and how we've talked about it. And again, and I guess that's another issue with kind of how we talk about these things. We've gotten to a point where we can't admit that, hey, you know what? Maybe we had this wrong. Everything is about doubling down now. And that's unfortunate because I think it's okay to want something to see if it works. You believe it might work and then go, oh, wait a minute. This actually did not work. It's actually made things worse. Maybe we could go back, but we can't. And that's the unfortunate part. We'll see what the college football playoff expansion does for the conversation, but I don't really think it's going to improve much of anything.
Well, the mega conferences, I don't think help either.
No, they don't. They don't. Giglio has a dream of like a jerk conference where like all the schools don't like each other, like a truly petty conference. You know, you've got ECU, West Virginia, NC State, like those types of teams in there where they all dislike each other. That might be interesting.
I could get behind that. I want to ask you this. You appreciate the finer, nerdier things in life. Okay. You would agree with that.
Sure.
Okay. Kind of what you've been saying about it seems like the ACC has an Arrested Development problem where Fox could not market the smartest, funniest show on television for 3 seasons.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the ACC has that problem. It cannot market what is a good league.
Unfortunately, the ACC's got a bunch of different problems. The biggest one they can't do anything about, and that's the makeup of the league being a bunch of private schools that don't have large enrollments. The Big Ten has that. The SEC has that on top of the fact that where they are, college football is their professional sport. I get into arguments about this all the time. You know, when the ACC decided to do their expansion and consume the Big East, it was at a time in which cable homes was the driver, and you wanted to get into the large Eastern Shore, Boston, New York, et cetera, right? Go after Notre Dame to get all the popularity for the Irish.
Oh my God.
But unfortunately, technology changed everything, and the play to get into those cable homes is not as lucrative as you thought it was going to be. And then in the process, you ended up making up a league that is usually third or fourth fiddle in those respective markets, which isn't the case in all those SEC markets. I had this said to me one time by somebody at NC State, where they were flabbergasted by, I think it was the Mississippi State visit. Both like baseball and football had gone to Mississippi State, and they were flabbergasted by how the schools were talked about. They were the professional team. Everybody loved them up. Everybody rode for it. I remember doing an interview with a station out in Arkansas ahead of, I think, an NCAA tournament game. And they were kind of thrown off by the fact that, I wasn't just like pumping up North Carolina. I'm like, well, guys, we got 3 different schools here. It's not just one thing. So all these things I'm making to illustrate the point that you can't do anything about your makeup. And you also, it's not that you can't market the ACC. It's that they haven't leaned into the things that the ACC is about. One of my biggest gripes with the ACC network is that they try to treat it like it's the SEC, that everybody in the ACC loves each other. They don't. There's no conference pride. It's conference pettiness. We like the schadenfreude of another school suffering. That's what we enjoy in the ACC. I mean, shout out to Corey Smith, who runs Pack Pride. He kind of got caught up in it because he did a count of how many times the ACC network was tweeting about Drake May. And they're trying to like, Drake May with the huff face emoji. Nobody in the ACC wants to see that stuff. Where in the SEC, people want to see we're the best and everything else, and Feinbaum's going to like do the circus and everything else. I think it's a failure to understand your people, not necessarily market it in a way that others will accept you. You got to market to your people. And I don't even think they can do that right half the time.
Well, so they do have an arrested development problem. It's just not marketing outward; it's marketing inward.
Yeah, that would be it. That's the way
Right.
I would look at it. And I have talked to people at the ACC about, why are shows the way that they are. And, again, I don't envy their position because they got to run a network that the presidents and the ADs are watching, and they want to make sure that they're getting good coverage. They don't want to see somebody on there, making deep cut jokes about a school or whatever it is. And that's unfortunate because that's kind of what makes up the ACC. But thankfully that lives on social media. If you can get on social media and you can find that hashtag #GoACCLife and make the jokes and people enjoy it. And that's how I get by in football season. That's how I derive entertainment during the football season. Because if you can't laugh at it, what are we doing?
All right. Question for you. I want to switch entirely to a different topic. I know you're a Star Wars guy.
Yeah.
All right. I'm a Star Wars guy myself. I want to ask you a couple questions about Star Wars.
Okay.
All right. I just do this for fun so I can talk about whatever I want on here. All right. Star Wars Rebels. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Your favorite character, who is it and why is it Chopper?
Oh, I can't stand Chopper. What are you
Are you kidding me?
Chopper's the worst.
He is sir. No, I respectfully, his character is amazing. One. Okay.
What, a droid, a crappy
with PTSD?
Droid?
No. Surly. He's a serial killer. If you go on Reddit, they have a body count kill list for Chopper.
Okay.
All right. And there's an episode where he starts reliving some of his Clone Wars experiences. Yeah. And it's clear they're doing a PTSD vibe. He's got a lot of depth.
I'll be kind of boring. My favorite character on that show was Kanan. So because I think the reason why I ended up joining him because I read the comics that kind of tied along with it, right? And they're kind of doing this stuff now in the video game with like Jedi Fallen Order and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I watched that first season of Bad Batch, and I did not like the way that they kind of retconned how he went through Order 66, because in the comics it went by a little bit different way where he kind of, caught up with smuggler and various other things, if I remember the comic run quickly. But the reason why I enjoyed him is because it's the rare thing that happens in the Star Wars stuff and what they abandoned for what should have been episode, Rise of Skywalker. The idea that a Jedi's not dealing in absolute.
Rise of Skywalker. Oh,
Rise of Skywalker. That as much as people talk about Sith dealing in absolutes, so do Jedi, right? And Kanan kind of came at it from a perspective of finding the gray, and you get into the concept of the gray Jedi and all that kind of stuff that's in the expanded universe and everything else. And I think that's probably why I was upset when I read the leaked Colin Trevorrow script, where they were actually going to explore that between Rey and Kylo and another Force being that was kind of like, yeah, guy, and kind of tying into Luke and Last Jedi, where he's like, yeah, all that stuff is crap. Look what it resulted in. There's something in between, and getting out of the way of the whole preordained destiny crap by introducing that. Oh yeah, by the way, Force sensitivity could be with anybody, with the little Harry Potter kid in the stable, right? But instead they freaked out, and we got the whole lineage crap again. And that's not what Star Wars is about. It's not lineage crap.
That was lazy storytelling.
That was lazy storytelling.
Super lazy, and it's typical for him, J.J. Abrams with movies, as you saw when they did the reboot of Wrath of Khan. That was horribly lazy and terrible.
Yeah. Well, what's funny though is that I had no problems with the way that Abrams handled Force Awakens. I think Force Awakens was exactly what it needed to be. It was reboot. It was a soft reboot. Make it fun again. Make everybody kind of bring them back in, kind of give them the same kind of comfort food. I mean, was Last Jedi perfect? No, none of the Star Wars movies are perfect. But to me, it at least tried to go in a different direction that wasn't going to end with, somehow the Emperor has returned, which gets us to Mandalorian and Dave Filoni and what they're trying to do. And God bless them. It was already yeoman's work to make Clone Wars tie together with Revenge of the Sith, and they did a fantastic job. Now he has to work towards making it so that Poe Dameron saying somehow the Emperor return isn't a punchline. It will always be a punchline, but somehow they're gonna make this thing work. And I got to admit, I went, when they started dropping those hints in this last season of Mandalorian, I started rolling my eyes, but they handle it in such a good way, in my opinion, that I'm like, all right, let's get us to the movie crossover event, because that's where this is all going. It's leading to the big Rebels crossover Thrawn event that Filoni's going to direct, and I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued about it.
I'm very excited about that. But I do want to mention to you about Chopper. I checked, over 50,000 kills.
Damn.
Yeah. See now.
Okay.
All right. See, I had an interview once where I asked a job applicant the exact same question I asked about you. Somehow she mentioned that she liked Rebels. Her and her family liked Rebels. And I said, well, what's your favorite character? Who's your favorite character and why is it Chopper? She still works for me today.
Nice.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Nice.
I mean,
can we agree that Star Wars Resistance was terrible?
Which one was that?
That animated show that was a kid show, and it wasn't even a good kid show.
I don't know if I saw that one.
Don't.
Okay.
Don't.
And here's the thing. I've been trying to watch Andor. It sounds like your kids and my kids are about the same age. For some reason, whenever I put that on, the talking starts.
Oh, yeah. You can't have that.
No.
Wait, so have you not watched Andor yet?
No, I've tried.
Okay. Well, here's what you need to do. Here's a pro tip on Andor.
Send the kids away.
Well, send the kids away. But it's funny. Oftentimes I'll get questions about, the kids are old enough now to start watching Star Wars, and people ask, well, how do what order should I watch them in if you're starting it cold, right? And I was introduced to the Machete order years ago, and I did that, leading up to the sequel trilogy.
Wait. What
are you not familiar with the Machete order?
No, I'm thinking of the movie Machete.
No, not the Grindhouse film,
right?
Machete, no. So the Machete, are you familiar with the Machete order?
No, that's why I'm interrupting you.
Okay, got it. So the Machete order is you watch the movies 4 or 5. So you watch Star Wars and you watch Empire Strikes Back. From there, you have a choice to make. How deep do you want to get? If you want to get super deep, well, you go all the way back and you start watching Attack of the Clones. You completely skip Phantom Menace. Totally skip Phantom Menace.
Fair.
But if you want to get deep, you go back and you watch Attack of the Clones, which I think as of today came out 21 years ago, right? I think that's the anniversary. Anyway, then you kind of piece together the Clone Wars shows if you want to, Revenge of the Sith, right? And then you watch Return of the Jedi. Okay. I would suggest the more basic version, in which you watch 4, 5. You get the reveal, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's his dad. You go back to watch Revenge.
Spoilers. Sorry.
Alert.
And you're right. May 16, 2002.
Okay, there. I thought I saw that nugget today. You go back to Revenge of the Sith, where you get okay, so here's this like Cliff Notes relationship with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and how the Emperor becomes the Emperor. And the way it ends actually ties in pretty well with how Return of the Jedi starts with, okay, now when you finally get to see the Emperor, not just in a hologram form, you're like, okay, now I get why the dynamic is the dynamic. Because remember, when you watch the movies originally, you're thinking, well, Darth Vader's the badass. And now you're telling me there's this other guy? Well, it does a better job giving you context as to why the Emperor is the actual leader here. And then, of course, you can watch the sequels. But that's the machete order. That's what I'd recommend if you never do that, which gets to Andor. Andor is intended to be 3-episode arcs. Now, I watched them every week when they came out because I really enjoyed the show. My kids weren't all that interested, but after I watched, you haven't watched any of them yet?
I've tried to watch them. I think I got through 2, but it was disrupted repeatedly by children talking.
Gotcha. So what you need to do is you need to break them down into 3-episode arcs. That's how they're intended to be watched. It's 12 episodes, 3-episode arcs. They're basically 4 movies. That's how you have to watch them. They have a start, a middle, and an end, and then it repeats itself. Start, middle, end. And you have a greater appreciation for how they close these arcs rather than watching a week-to-week show. So I would just carve out about 2 hours of your night and watch the first 3 episodes. Now, the first 3 episodes are a little slow, but it's, but worth it to give you context as to who this guy is. And then things really pick up 4, 5, 6. And then it goes from there.
All right. Where do you fit in my favorite, Rogue One, in this order? And then where do you work in the TV shows, including the animated ones?
So it helps that Rogue One, I had 0 expectations going to when I saw it.
Which also has Chopper in it, but continue.
I know, a little low-key cameo by the Rebels crew in Rogue One. Again, Rogue One, not a perfect movie. It's got some slow parts. Totally get that. But the reason why that movie is always going to have it's going to rank high for me is because when I saw it in the theater for the first time, I knew they were going to tie it in with A New Hope, right? Show, movie ends. All right, you should be able to just go start watching A New Hope. I was not expecting him to.
Spoilers.
Yeah, more spoiler alerts. So, like, when you see the shuttle go to the cruiser, you're going, oh, okay. So it looks like Darth is tracking him down. Okay. And then they cut to inside I'm like, oh, wait, that's the actual Tantive 4. Oh, okay. Are they they're not gonna, So, everybody's scrambling. When that lightsaber turns on, I'm like,
oh yeah.
Oh, damn. Like, they're actually doing this. They're literally going to walk you up and you're going to see Darth Vader wreck some dudes. And I was like, there's that meme of a guy who's sitting back in his chair and then he moves up, the tension. That was me. I literally got to the edge of my theater seat. Like, holy crap, they're really doing this. And it's amazing. Like, even talking about it, I'm like, ooh, I got chills. I love it. I love that scene. So where would I rank it?
No, where would you put it in the machete order?
Oh, ooh, see,
that's the part. Because you got all these other shows.
That would be supplemental viewing at that point.
Okay.
That would be supplemental viewing. In the way that I would say that, Andor is going to fit nicely into that. because Andor does a really, really good job. And one thing that I appreciate about Andor that they haven't necessarily done a good job of in Mandalorian, but making it clear and defined that no, the Empire isn't cool. The Empire is bad. As we grew up understanding the Empire is bad. I blame TIE Fighter for this, by the way. Did you ever play TIE Fighter on the PC?
Mm-mm.
So are you familiar with X-Wing, the video game?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so X-Wing, for those who might not know, X-Wing was this PC game from LucasArts where it was a pretty involved flight simulator.
Oh, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and I had the joystick and it was all that stuff, right? So they came out with the flip side of it, TIE Fighter. And you got to be a pilot for the Empire and move your way up into these secret orders and doing some stuff for Darth Vader, who was doing like a covert thing and everything else. I blame that video game for making the Empire cool. Like, ooh, like, oh, okay, I like what they're doing with this. Andor did a good reset to remind you, no. This is a story about fascism and you need to stop it. And that's why I enjoy Andor.
The Mandalorian has done that too.
They've tried. The problem I've had with Mandalorian is that they're doing a little bit of they're trying to do a little bit of a cop out, and that the New Republic is just not as good too. I'm like, no. We're not doing that.
Okay, fair. Although keep in mind they're out in the frontier area. It's kind of like the West, where it's that's one of the things I like about Mandalorian is it's very much like a Western, and I love Westerns. Okay. And so there's parts of it that are lawless and there's a complete lack of order. Okay. So, but Bill Burr's storyline really drives home how bad the Empire is.
Yes. I agree with you on that. And at the same time, to give the writers credit, because Filoni usually knows what he's doing, that they have to set up a weak New Republic for the First Order to actually take shape as this Imperial remnant is starting to exist. And that's how you get to where we get with the First Order, which they kind of dabbled in with the comics, but nobody reads the comics. So,
well, yeah, some people do. Now, I think you said Filoni knows what he's doing. I'm trying to check this real quick. Yep. Filoni voiced Chopper.
There, see, you know what? You're making a compelling argument for Chopper. A very compelling argument for Chopper.
I'm just saying, him, K2SO, fantastic.
And I love K2SO. Love all of K2SO during that movie.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, and spoilers again, one of the things I really liked about that movie is the way each of the main characters died was phenomenal.
Yes.
Again, massive spoilers, but their deaths were fantastic.
Well, they're going to have to start doing that on this show because a lot of people ain't around. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that's true. That's true. Hopefully this summer, I've got to catch up on Bad Batch, Mandalorian, and Andor. But it's lacrosse season. It's winding down. So my time.
Gotcha.
My time is about to come back to me to an extent.
Nice.
Right. All right. Well, we've talked for a while. We nominally scratched the surface of Duke football. We talked about the ACC. We talked about podcasting. We talked about what you guys are up to now. We've talked about Star Wars, which is always a good thing to talk about. I've asked you a bunch of questions, so I like to give every guest who comes on an open mic. They can talk about whatever they want. So you got an open mic.
But I have that. I already have an open mic.
Well, you can answer one more series of questions, or I mean, you can talk about Cuban sandwiches.
I did have the Cuban biscuit at Biscuitville the other day. Wasn't that bad. I wasn't expecting it to be good. I was not expecting it to be good. But if any of your listeners, so here's we can close on this. So part of everything that's happened, I'm trying to rebuild our own YouTube subscriber base. And so far, I've been really, really happy with the response, and we're close to 3,000 subscribers. But every time I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll add some sort of dumb thing to do for TikTok or for YouTube Shorts. So when we got to 2,000 subscribers, I did a 1993 Carolina Panthers expansion team granted commemorative soda. It was terrible. It was awful. I've had some of these 30, 40-year-old sodas that have actually held up pretty well, but you can't, it's a clear glass bottle, so it's going to get light skunking and everything else. And for the 3,000 subscribers, which we're close to, we're about 250 subscribers away from 3,000. One of our listeners has offered up their 10th anniversary Carolina Hurricanes. It's called a sweet table wine. I don't know what that means. It's from 2007. Something tells me that has not aged well, but I will drink it during the show. Luke DeCock has offered me for 5,000 subscribers a old brass monkey, like an actual brass monkey liquor drink, not malt, but like an actual, like what the Beastie Boys are referencing, over ice. So I'll do that at 5,000 subscribers. So I need something for 4,000 because we're going to get to 3. I need to do something for 4,000. So I don't know if there's like some, I've had a 1992 Duke soda, can of Coca-Cola. I don't know if there's some old other Duke thing that I can try. I don't know. I'm actually looking for old beer, like an unopened beer. From the 80s, but any of that kind of stuff, I'm willing to try it for the content.
All right, I got something completely left field from that for 4,000.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I am.
Okay. All right. I assumed the answer to that was yes, as am I. You watch the Phantom Menace, record you watching it, and do like a Mystery Science Theater riff tracks thing of suffering through that. I mean, what do you think?
I would rather do,
anything but watching that movie.
No. What I was going to say, fun fact. I've actually never seen the Star Wars holiday special. So maybe I do a live version of that. I can do live commentary on the Star Wars holiday special. I'm pretty sure they have a VHS copy over at Alamo Draft House over in downtown Raleigh.
You can do it live. You can do live podcast episode.
You can do it right there. Maybe that's what I do. I'll do that. I'll see if I can find a copy of that, because I've literally, as much as it's been referenced, I feel like I know enough about it because it gets referenced all the time. They don't feel the need to watch it. It's like how some people are with Star Wars. They don't feel the need to watch Star Wars because it gets referenced all the time. But that's how I am with the holiday special. Like, I know that's where Boba Fett first shows up, and it's Life Day. There's all these things that they reference that get referenced now, all that stuff. But
all right, so we got something for 4,000. We got it. If you can find that, you're going to make that happen. That's great. And hopefully we will have many, many more subscrition-based numbers things that you will do on the podcast.
Yes, let's hope so.
All my email addresses, I have subscribed on YouTube. I've smashed the button.
Love it.
I've done them all. So, Joe, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it. We're going to try to line up a few more guests for the summer, and then we're going to get into the season. And if things go as planned, folks, I'm going to be interviewing beat writers, journalists, bloggers who cover our opposing teams in this upcoming season. I'm going to do something a little bit different, try to bring a little bit of a different type of content for the dozens of you who are out there who really enjoy Duke football. And I hope you guys will enjoy it, and I hope we will be able to have that going strong. Until then, though, follow us on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Hit us up on Twitter at DukeFB Coverage. Send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. And as always, go Duke.